Perhaps the high 20s across southeast England, 28 or 29. So a fine end to a Friday for many. This weak weather front, though, across parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England will just continue to sink a little bit further south, but dry for much of the UK. 1 or 2 showers across Scotland during the early hours, and overnight, once again, a mild night. Temperatures 12 to 15 Celsius as a low in the towns and cities, a little bit fresher in the countryside. So the weekend starts off dry and bright for many, a little bit of cloud across western areas, but this will dissolve as the day goes on. Plenty of blue skies for everyone. However, another weak weather front may move into the far northwest, and Northern Ireland, western Scotland turning cloudy, but temperatures again reaching the mid to high 20s. This continues on Sunday as well, and then perhaps even warmer as we get to Monday with 31.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Big Dog has fallen. He held on as long as he could, but after a relentless campaign by the Ramona blob leaving the government in tatters, Boris Johnson has been forced to resign as Prime Minister.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
So why was the establishment so desperate to bring one of Britain's most transformational prime ministers to his knees? I'll break down this depressing day for democracy in my digest next and examine the legacy Boris leaves. Then I'll get reactions from my superstar panel. Broadcaster Mike Parry, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and author and journalist Amy Nicole. Well, it was you, the people of Britain, who elected Boris in a landslide less than 3 years ago. So I want to know, do you think he was a good Prime Minister? Details on how you can get in touch for tonight's clash on the way soon. And we've got a barnstorming lineup of Conservative parent advisor to Boris in City Hall, Lord Moylan, former Boris advisor Colville Ranger, Conservative Albion Ancona, political commentator Suzanne Evans, and entrepreneur Charlie Mullins. They'll all do battle at 9:25. Will Brexit be Boris Johnson's greatest legacy? Former MEP Anne Widdecombe, who left the Tories for the Brexit Party during Theresa May's reign, is back tonight to deliver her verdict. And speaking of May, she's been touted as a caretaker PM, as insatiable Boris critics try to erase him immediately. With Labour leader Keir Starmer, who could also be out within days, let's not forget that, he's leading the charge.
They don't get rid of him, then Labour will step up in the national interest
and bring a vote of no confidence.
So should Boris leave Downing Street to be replaced by an interim Prime Minister? I say no, the country can't take any more upheaval, but we'll debate at 10. Another ex-Prime Minister, Sir John Major, is among those calling for Boris to go. But not just that, he wants Conservative Party members to be excluded from the leadership ballot too. I'm absolutely fuming about this attempt to install a Tory wet in the top job and influence policy before the dust has even settled. And I'll debate it with a woman who knows Major pretty well. Former Conservative Minister Edwina Curry is uncancelled at 10:40. How does the Tory party stop a Labour Lib Dem SNP government getting into power without Boris? Tory grandee David Mellor draws up a battle plan in The Outsider at 9:50. Did the meddling of Carrie Johnson, the Liberal voice in the Prime Minister's ear, contribute to his downfall? That's the view of Boris biographer Tom Bauer. He'll be here at 10:20. Plus, after Steve Baker and Suella Braverman become the first major Tory names to publicly hint at running for the top job, my panel have whittled down their top two candidates in a Dan Wootton Tonight leadership contest. And as the apparently impartial media erupts with unbridled joy over Boris's resignation, I'll name and shame the very worst offenders.
We've had people on his own side who did support him merely weeks ago who are saying it's over. And it is over.
Goodbye, Boris Johnson, and may we never look upon your like again.
All that and more are the impartial ones, folks, in the media buzz throughout the 10 hour. What a joke. I'll also reveal how tomorrow's front pages react to the PM's resignation throughout the show too. And will Boris get the consolation prize of being named today's greatest Briton? The final GBUJ of the week will be crowned at 10:50. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. What a day. After just 1,079 days, Boris Johnson has been toppled as Prime Minister after a relentless and vindictive campaign by the political establishment, MSM and Blob. Now some Ramonas are even calling for him to be booted from number 10 with a caretaker PM imposed and votes on the next Tory leader stolen from members. What a disgrace. Well, Darren McCaffrey has been reporting on this extraordinary situation all day. He joins us now from a very busy Downing Street. So, Darren, what is the latest? Is Boris Johnson definitely going to stay in place until a new Tory leader is elected? And do we have any idea about how that process is going to look?
Yeah, I think more likely than not, he is going to stay until the new leader is appointed. You are entirely right, though, in suggesting that some Conservative MPs, and indeed other grandees of the Conservative Party, like John Major and Michael Heseltine, are saying that he cannot be trusted inside number 10 in the weeks ahead. However, I think it is likely he will remain there and that the leadership contest will start next week, a contest that could have quite a lot of candidates trying to get the top job, but in the end it will be, of course, up to members to decide between the final two. What's the timescale for that? Well, it is entirely possible the parliamentary party decide who they want in the final two in the next couple of weeks, and that members will decide in August, Dan. And when they decide in August, that will be the person who will then become the incumbent of number 10, and Boris Johnson will leave. Tonight, though, he's trying to again assert his authority and get the government back on track. He's appointed a whole raft of new ministers, including some who'd resigned in recent days. So the government looks like it's getting back on its feet and functioning again.
Of course, this is our system. I mean, feels like everyone's celebrating there, Darren. I mean, I think this is a bad day for democracy.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that they're playing the national anthem behind me, but that's on Horse Guards Parade. There is a sense here that the party, I think the Conservative Party, in the end got fed up with this. But you are right. When I was standing here, when Boris Johnson was speaking there a little earlier, there were dozens of Conservative MPs, very loyal MPs, who had turned up, who were disappointed by the decision the party has taken. They believe that Boris Johnson had a mandate from 14 million voters, that he still had his term in situ, and that ultimately it should be up to the general public to decide who the Prime Minister is, not necessarily necessarily just MPs, though that is not how our parliamentary system works. But they are pretty disappointed. The big question for them is, who will they support, those Boris loyalists, who will they support in this leadership contest?
Fabulous work on this historic day. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, live from Downing Street. Thank you so much, Darren. My opinion coming up shortly on this terrible day. But, you know, we do the news first here on GB News. So here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. Addressing the country outside Number 10, he said he was deeply saddened, but it was clearly the will of his party. He also explained that he fought to remain because he felt it was his duty. The decision to step down follows 3 days of government revolt that's seen almost 60 MPs, including 5 cabinet ministers, quit. Boris Johnson says he'll continue to serve as Prime Minister until the party chooses his successor, which is expected to happen by August.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. I know that there will be many people who are relieved and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
Well, following that resignation speech, Boris Johnson tweeted his thanks to the British public, saying it was an immense privilege to serve as their Prime Minister. He also pledged to continue serving in their best interests until his successor is in place. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the next Tory leader needs to attract broad support.
Next election is likely about 2 years from now. We need to deliver in that time, but then we've got to also be able to get the support that we need to form the administration after that.
Well, that's his view. Mayor of London Sadiq Khan says Boris Johnson should step down immediately.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, should be the caretaker Prime Minister, whilst the Conservatives choose their next leader. Once he or she's been elected, there should be a general election, so the British public have the choice of a fresh start, and I'll be campaigning for a Labour government led by Keir Starmer.
To other news, and the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that the mother of baby P has now been released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son at their home in Tottenham. Baby P suffered more than 50 injuries, including fractured ribs. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab has condemned the decision to release her, saying the parole system needs a fundamental overhaul. And actor James Caan, who starred as gangster Sonny Corleone in the Godfather movie, has died at the age of 82. His family announced the news on Twitter, saying they appreciate the outpouring of love and heartfelt condolences. Caan was also well known for roles in Brian's Song, Misery and Elf. Actor Arnold Schwarzenegger has described him as an icon and a legend. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Dan Wootton tonight.
They won, folks. They got them in the end. Let's be honest for a moment. They were never going to stop until they'd secured Boris Johnson's head. Since December, the campaign by the political establishment, the Ramona elite, the civil service blob, and crucially, the country's biased broadcast media, notably the BBC, ITV News and Sly News, has been fever pitch. Eventually, the Conservative Party decided it was impossible to govern while also fighting such dark and powerful forces. These are deeply depressing times for British democracy. Boris is the third Tory Prime Minister brought down in just 6 years. The febrile and hostile establishment in the MSM knows the power they have to bring political paralysis to the country. And why were they so determined to destroy Boris? Think about it. He was a transformational Prime Minister. A Prime Minister who stared them all down to finally deliver Brexit. A Prime Minister who had vowed to cut the size of the civil service and demanded they return to their damn desks. A Prime Minister who was going to scrap the hated BBC licence fee and sell the far-left Channel 4. It's not hard to see why they would stop at nothing to discredit him. I mean, do you know last night, the BBC actually quoted a source saying Boris Johnson is, quote, now like Putin. That's how deranged and determined his critics have become. The celebration that broke out across the airwaves today, especially on the Boris-bashing corporation once known as the BBC, blew up any final suggestion that we have an impartial broadcast media here in Britain.
We've had people on his own side who did support him merely weeks ago who are saying it's over. And it is over.
I'm almost grateful to Boris Johnson there for just reminding us at the end that all of the words I used to describe him are fair and accurate and in some ways not even adequate, because he is utterly reprehensible, utterly vile, utterly despicable. Goodbye, Boris Johnson, and may we never look upon your like again.
The country now faces up to 3 months of chaos as the Tory party elect a new leader. Again, that's exactly what Boris critics want as they plan to usher in a Labour Lib Dem SNP coalition from hell that would put both Brexit and the Union under serious threat. The Tory Ramonas have been just as bad, actually. They've let their party down and their country down. Former PM John Major shed his last scrap of dignity today by saying Boris should be removed as a caretaker Prime Minister and proposing Conservative members no longer vote on the next leader. We all know why. He wants a fellow Europhile back in number 10, a Ramona, like Jeremy Hunt. They are so transparent, they don't even pretend to believe in democracy anymore. Now, did Boris make mistakes? Of course he did. Lockdowns, tax hikes, a frenzied march to net zero especially. But was he ever given a realistic chance to succeed? No. I wanted to share with you part of a conversation I had earlier today with a source close to the Prime Minister. They told me people had no interest in talking about the quite historic leadership achievements, be that dragging us through a pandemic, a world-leading vaccine programme rollout, and a quite uniquely special performance in regards to that European war. Those people who wanted him gone never wanted to acknowledge that at any point. Never, ever. It was always just the Westminster personality stuff. That was the only focus. Labour has had not one policy or grown-up discussion. It has been an out-and-out campaign to remove Boris. And you always have to ask yourself why. Why did they want to get rid of Boris so much? Why did sections of the media do that? Ultimately, wounded or not, he is the Conservatives' best chance of winning an election. Really interesting last sentence there, by the way. That source close to Boris Johnson says he is the Tories' best chance. Not was, he is. So maybe Boris will mount a comeback when his party see sense. As the Daily Mail said today, the truth is Mr. Johnson stands head and shoulders above almost all his assassins. Compared with the mountains he has scaled, their combined achievements are little more than molehills. The latest polls back that up, by the way, showing all the Tory leadership favourites, except Rishi Sunak, losing to useless slippery Starmer. So, to Boris Johnson, yours was a project not completed, largely down to external forces. But thank you for delivering us Brexit. That is an achievement for the ages that will go down in the history books. I'm sad to say, after less than 3 years. But here are the Boris best bits.
Mr. Speaker, it is not too late to save Brexit. We have time in these negotiations. We have changed tack once, and we can change again.
And therefore I give notice that Boris Johnson is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Well, my friends. Good morning, everybody, my friends. Well, we did it. We did it. I say respectfully to our stentorian friend in the blue 12-star hat. That's it. Time to put a sock in the megaphone. Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. The most important thing to say tonight is that this is not an end, but a beginning. This is the moment when the dawn breaks and the curtain goes up on a new act in our great national drama. If we listened to Captain Hindsight, we would not have come out of lockdown in July last year, Mr. Speaker. We would have stayed in lockdown over Christmas and New Year, Mr. Speaker. How are you? Glad to see you. I'm very, very, very glad to see you. How are you doing? You're looking well.
Yes.
Unbelievable considering what you've been through. You are strong.
Yeah, I think so.
Fantastic. Well, you're absolute heroes. That I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Optimistic to the end. Let me bring in my superstar panel now. The broadcaster Mike Parry, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the journalist and author Amy Nicole. So, Sean Bailey, you were close to Boris. He backed you in your London mayoral race. How do you feel about him being deposed by your party?
I think it's a mistake. I know it's been popular to chase Boris around and focus on everything that he hasn't done and all the rest of that. But I think as a Tory, I would say this to any Tory listening, let's be careful this doesn't turn into a monumental piece of self-harm. He won that majority, not by mistake, but through work and through connecting. And if you look at what's going on in the Tory party now, a great deal of our MPs are actually Lib Dems. They're not actually Tories. And what Boris did, he identified what the country wanted, what Tories wanted. I truly believe that most of the electorate in this country are Tories, but I also believe if we're not careful, we'll act in a way that Tories can't support, and then we'll get a Labour government.
Mike Parry, you were trending on Twitter earlier this week defending Boris Johnson, but you think it was the right decision for him to go in the end?
Yeah, I do, actually. You see, my argument with Boris has always been the dynamism, the power, the commitment to those things that he believed in were fantastic, including Ukraine. That's, for me, his star policy. But have you heard one person from anywhere across the political divide praising Boris for leading the world against the tyrant Putin? And that's how narrow-minded and closed-minded the political parties in this country are against get rid of Boris because he brought us Brexit and we hate him for that and they'll never forgive him for it. The people in this country are most important now are the people of northern England and people who live in coastal towns along the south coast. They are so loyal to Boris because they are what Sean's just hinted at, the silent majority. You don't see them in the streets jumping up and down, Boris, 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 but they've got common sense in the north of England and they know that the society in which they want to grow up in can only be balanced if you've got people who commit to democracy and fairness and saying, take more of your own money, put it back in your own pocket and spend it. And as long as those people are around, as long as... this is why I'm against him, because he wouldn't pursue those sort of policies. But that is a Tory policy. That's why I think he's got to go. And that's why I want a Tory leader who will pursue those Tory policies of self-sustaining society.
Amy Nicole, you're one of those folk in the London Champagne Socialist Media Elite Brigade celebrating tonight.
You look like it.
Dan, you look so sad.
Well, it's a sad day for this country.
You look devastated. Would you like a dish?
No, I'm more angry. I'm more angry.
I've got something that will cheer you up then. Hooray!
Oh.
It's finally here, the day that should have been how many months ago? How long has this day been
immature.
Necessary? Finally.
So you're celebrating the fact that in the middle of a cost of living crisis, in a middle of a health crisis, this country is going to have no Prime Minister with a strong mandate for 3 months. You think that's a good thing? No, all you want to do is bring down the government. And you want to bring down Brexit
No,
too.
and it got to the point this week where I started to feel genuinely, sincerely hurt for true Conservatives, because I don't think Boris Johnson represents Conservative voters, and I certainly do. He doesn't appeal to me because I'm a Labour voter, but 100% he's neither a Conservative either.
Amy, you're one of the folk who believe that the Brexit decision should be overturned.
Let's think about it. Okay.
Well, no. Are you or are you not?
His number one thing is he delivered Brexit. That's like me ordering a pizza. Yes, they delivered it.
But you want it to be overturned,
They delivered it, but it turned up covered in hair, upside down, and nobody wants a slice of it because it's bad. The deal is terrible.
But Amy, just answer my question, please, because you're here to answer my questions. You want the biggest democratic mandate in British history overturned, don't you?
The people voted for the Conservative Party. They didn't vote for Boris as an
No, I'm talking about Brexit.
No, I don't want it overturned.
Because Brexit and Boris are the same thing.
I want Brexit to work. I don't want to go back on the decision. I understand that has been put to the public. I don't necessarily think it was the fairest referendum.
Yeah, but you want to be back in the single market, don't you?
For the sake of the country.
So you don't want Brexit?
I went to the
You want free movement, don't you?
Putting security
you want free movement, don't you?
Putting security tags
but this is what it's about, Sean. This is what it's about.
I really want people to understand. If you're watching this now and you think you're going to vote for Labour, understand what they're talking about. People voted to leave and Labour supporters told you were stupid. That's the kind of thing they told women when they didn't want to give them the vote. But they pulled the wool over your eyes. We left the European Union.
And Boris gave these people a voice, Sean.
Stronger.
Boris gave these people a voice.
But here's the challenge. We've got to make sure that voice continues to exist in the Conservative Party.
Well, what a great superstar panel today. We're going to have lots of debate throughout the show. Mike Parry, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, thank you so much for being here. But you can keep your tissues. You can keep your tissues. Coming up, will Brexit be Boris Johnson's greatest legacy? Former MEP Anne Widdecombe, who left the Tories for the Brexit Party during Theresa May's premiership, returns to deliver her verdict. But first, was BJ a good Prime Minister? Lord Moylan, Colville Ranger, Albion Ancona, Suzanne Evans and Charlie Mullins battled it out on the flash. I want to know what you think too. Dan at gbnews.uk. At GBNews, we've got a poll running there too. The results in just 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Tory grandees Anne Widdecombe, David Mellor and Edwina Curry coming up, but now it's time for The Clash. With Boris Johnson overseeing a raft of once-in-a-generation crises during his short tenure, you could argue the odds were stacked against him from the start. But as I wrote in a much-debated column for the Mail Online today, the Tory party will come to regret knifing Boris, the only man who could ever have delivered Brexit, defeated socialism and smashed Labour's Red Wall. The Westminster witch hunt crippled a man who has never even lost an election and secured an 80-seat landslide majority just 938 days ago. In achieving all that, Boris today described being PM as the, quote, best job on the planet.
I know that there will be many people who are relieved and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
What do you think? Was Boris Johnson a good Prime Minister? A simple question tonight. You can email me, Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet your thoughts to @gbnews. We've got a poll running there. I'm going to be fascinated to see those results. I'll bring them to you soon. But I'm bringing in a fresh raft of political masterminds to clash on this alongside our former London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey tonight. They are Boris's former advisor, Colville Ranger, the political commentator Suzanne Evans, Conservative Albie Amankona, and Conservative peer and advisor to Boris when he was Mayor of London, Lord Moylan. Great to have you all here. So, Lord Daniel Moylan, let me start with you. You remain loyal to Boris until the end.
Yeah, well, I'm still loyal to Boris as a friend. And was he a great Prime Minister? He was one of the most transformative Prime Ministers in my lifetime, on a par with Thatcher. He changed the country more than as much as Thatcher did, and certainly the most transformative of the 21st century so far.
Sean Bailey?
I think we just need to apply some science to this. He was given a poison chalice in Brexit and he delivered it. The Ukraine have been attacked by Russia and he's defended them. We have a cost of living crisis. He has a plan. And when we went through lockdown and we were all on our faces, some 9 million employees he took on overnight. The results speak for themselves. People who don't think this is because, of course, they've concentrated on what the biased media have focused their minds on. But look at your wallet, look at your children's future and ask yourself the same question.
Albie Amankona?
I think overall we have to remember the context of how Boris came to power. In 2018, the business of government couldn't be done. Brexit was up in the air. Theresa May couldn't get anything through. And we almost lost to the Labour Party in a general election against Jeremy Corbyn. But we also can't forget what's happened over the past year. He's made some very silly mistakes. He's made some decisions which really should not have been made. And I think if we look at both of those things together, I don't think he'll be seen as the worst Prime Minister, but he certainly won't be seen as the best Prime Minister.
Suzanne Evans, you actually say Boris will be seen as one of the most unsuccessful Prime Ministers of all time. Why?
I'm afraid I do. And I say that as somebody who very much supported him to become Prime Minister, voted for him to become Prime Minister, and was actually very encouraged by his early days when he did deliver Brexit. There's no doubt about that. But unfortunately, then everything seemed to fall apart. Yes, we had COVID. His response to that, I think, was completely inadequate. The best that can be said for Boris Johnson was he didn't take such a hardline authoritarian line on that as the Labour Party did. But he hasn't made the most of Brexit. Talking about have we got more money in our pockets? Well, I certainly haven't. We've got the highest tax burden in 60 years. That's not a Conservative approach to life. And I think ultimately Boris turned out to be more libertarian than Conservative and therefore didn't really get the job done that he was put into power to do with that stonking majority.
Colville Ranger, as one of his former advisors, how do you respond to that from Suzanne?
I think Suzanne's not looking at the broader picture here. And I think what we need to do is make sure, as you say, Dan, that the MSN don't write their history on Boris's conservatism. This man has redefined British politics at a time when it needed to change. Other parts of the world have struggled with what's going on, the challenges they're facing. Yes, Brexit was a problem for this country, but he redefined it by reaching out to voters that weren't Conservatives. You do not get people who for generations would not go near a Tory box on the voting slip and get them to vote Tory if you don't change the narrative. He has changed British politics. He also did that in government. He had a unique position to drive that through. I saw it firsthand with Daniel, what he did in London. And I saw a politician who could walk the streets of London, people would stop and clap and cheer because they saw a man who connected with them. Yes, he's a unique politician, and that's what scared people as well. And I think that's the thing that we have to really be thankful for, that he managed to defy those people who tried to stop him. And that's what he wanted all of us to do when we worked with him, was defy the naysayers and bring change and bring positivity and do the right thing for the future of this country.
Lord Moylan, I mean, it's interesting. Oh, sorry, you come back, Suzanne.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't disagree with any of that. There's no doubt that Boris Johnson is a brilliant campaigner and taking those red wall seats, absolutely incredible. But then he blew it. He didn't have a poison chalice. He had a golden chalice. He had everything. Who can only dream of having an 80-seat majority? And then, unfortunately, he threw it away. I think it's a great shame.
He hasn't thrown. This is not about policy. This is about personality. He's been hounded out by personality. Name the policies that he's failed on. I'd like to see the list of policies. And he's got the delivery. Those policemen, those hospitals that are going to be delivered, those election manifesto commitments will still be met by this Conservative government if it gets the right leader and takes that through. That will also be his legacy.
But he's broken several manifesto
The longest
commitments.
waiting list. Longest NHS waiting list ever. Like I said, highest tax burden in 60 years. Absolutely nothing's been done to stop illegal migrants coming across the Channel. He got Brexit done. That's it.
Yeah, but there were obviously massive external factors, weren't there? I mean, no one could have predicted the pandemic. No one could have predicted the European war. The issue that I have is that the establishment, the mainstream media, the blob, since December last year, they have been out to get him.
Well, they've been out to get him longer than that. I mean, you're absolutely right, of course. There were external factors. And, you know, people will argue for years whether the government as a whole responded in the right way to the pandemic. People generally agree that the government's response under Boris to the Ukraine war has been really very, very good.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, he's saved the world, hasn't
he? Even some Labour people are willing to say that. So, you know, people will argue about what he achieved. Everyone has flaws. And I think Boris does have some flaws. And one of them is he's actually a kind man who wants to get on with people. And he had a cabinet that contained people from all wings of the party. And he ended up being trapped. And a lot of Suzanne's criticisms are actually criticisms of Rishi Sunak. And Boris, you know, should he have sacked Rishi Sunak?
Oh, absolutely, he should have. And Sean Bailey, is that
taxes are something Boris has been trying to get down, and there's been huge resistance from the Treasury and no pushback against Treasury officials from Rishi Sunak. I'm not arguing with Suzanne because she has a point, but we need to understand where the weaknesses were. As far as the campaign against him, I always knew that they would never, ever forgive him and try to get him out. And indeed, you know, I tried to say that to him. But he sort of believed you could build people back together. That's the sort of person he is, that you could bring people back together again. And I think that was, frankly, that was his undoing.
Almost too optimistic.
Too optimistic and too open to people. You know, people have talked about Greek tragedy on some of these programmes today because Boris, you know, he's a classicist and all of that. I think the real pattern here is more like Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar started a revolution, took control of Rome, and then he tried to make friendly, you know, peace and friendship with all his enemies, and they'd all get used to it. And it took them a year or so, and they put the knife in the back and got rid of him.
Sean Bailey, was there a lack of killer instinct there? You know, when he should have sacked Sunak, he didn't.
I think the lack of killer instinct wasn't just in the PM, it was in the parliamentary party in particular. Too many of our MPs now sound like Lib Dems. We've let Labour dominate the conversation so much in Westminster that we're afraid to be Conservatives. You talk to people about we shouldn't be legalising drugs. Oh, no, they get all Lib Dem and Labour on you. We can place much of this blame at the Prime Minister's door, but we must look at what the party has done in the very recent past and what it wants to do next. Suzanne definitely has some points, but I think the level of opposition he received, it was literally a conspiracy.
It was manic.
Yeah,
absolutely
you
manic and vicious.
Had people on the BBC who made it their business to remove the Prime Minister. Yeah, and they're meant to be
I'm sorry, Sean. I mean, look, we've got to accept that the Prime Minister did make some fundamental mistakes, and they were self-inflicted. His handling of the Paterson scandal was poor. That was self-inflicted. His handling of Partygate was poor. That was self-inflicted. His handling of the Chris Pincher scandal this week was poor.
Yes, but they're hardly Watergate, Albie.
That's not a conspiracy.
That's sort of minor HR issues.
They're not minor HR issues.
That should not reach the level of overturning and deposing a democratically elected Prime Minister.
The point is those things happen and they're not conspiracy theories. He has to take responsibility. He squandered an opportunity of an 80-seat majority with his bad behaviour.
Hold on, Albie, you're right, but let's be clear. Here's where I get my conspiracy theory for. Keir Starmer has had to face absolutely none of the ritual that the Prime Ministers have to face, and he's in roughly the same situation.
Or
even
Sturgeon
now,
and Ian
nobody's
Blackford,
asking him
who are
any
in exactly
questions.
the same situation with the sexual abuse scandal
Exactly.
right now, and no one is talking about it.
So when I use the words conspiracy, when the Labour Party attack a Conservative PM, that is their job. When the BBC do it, we need to ask questions because they're meant to be... They're not meant to do that.
Suzanne, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Sean's saying. There's absolutely no doubt there has been a massive media campaign against Boris Johnson. But let's not forget who actually plunged the knife into his back in the last 48 hours. It wasn't the mainstream media. It was members of his own party. It was 50 of his own ministers and umpteen MPs all queuing up, Brutus style, to stab him in the back. So I don't really think you can blame the media.
But Colville, isn't that because they had created political paralysis?
Boris Johnson himself used to be a journalist, and he should have a little bit more nous about how this works.
But Colville, there was political paralysis created by the media.
Suzanne, the drama of it has been built up over the last. If you let me now answer your point, the drama of this has been the media have had a drip feed campaign.
Okay, Suzanne, just let Colville respond.
The media have had a constant drip feed campaign on this, which is what's built up the pressure in the minds of parliamentarians, the weak and the fearful in the Conservative Party, and they haven't been able to see past it. If you have continuous drip feeding of this narrative, of these stories, of this personality dragging him through the mud. You know, we had the last real populist prime minister of this country was a man called Tony Blair. He had 1 million people march against him about a war that people felt was unjustified. Was he taken apart around his personality? No. There were stories about it, but it did not happen the way it has happened with this Prime Minister, and I think we should be fearful of
because
that.
let's be honest, that I completely agree, and he had friends in the establishment. Look, I just want to get a one-word answer from all of you because it is the question we're putting to our viewers. So finally, Colville Ranger, was Boris Johnson a good Prime Minister, yes or no?
Yes, in history, he will go down as a good Prime Minister with flaws, as all of them have had.
Suzanne Evans, was BJ a good PM?
I don't think history will judge him kindly, unfortunately.
Albion Ancona.
With a heavy heart, because of the opportunity squandered, it's going to have to be bad.
Sean Bailey.
I think history will judge him well as long as we don't let MSN write all of that history. I think he was good. Suzanne had some points, so does Abby as well. Mistakes were made, but on the whole, he was a very good PM.
And final word to you, Lord Moylan.
Yeah, I think he's a really transformative turning point in British history, and the test for future Prime Ministers is going to be whether they follow on and deliver his legacy. Because if they squander it and go back to the situation pre-Brexit and all of that, then the Tory party is toast and the country is going to slide off into sort of anonymity.
Thank you to my political masterminds tonight. But what do you think? Was Boris Johnson a good Prime Minister? From Manny. Boris was a good PM, but had a poor backing cast from a poor party of backstabbers. From Kaz, a good PM until first Carrie and then COVID. After that, he was no longer the same person. And from Angie, he was a passionate, charismatic, highly motivated PM, brought down by the MSM and opposition. He was our best since Churchill. I'm gutted. And your verdict is now in. 64% of you agree that Boris Johnson was a good Prime Minister. 36% of you say he wasn't. Coming up, how does the Tory party stop a ruinous Labour, Lib Dem, SNP coalition of chaos without Boris at the helm? Tory grandee David Mellor draws up a battle plan in The Outsider at 9:50. But first, political firebrand and former Tory minister Anne Widdecombe joins me to give her verdict on what the PM's greatest legacy will be. Back soon.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Tory Big Beast David Mellor and Boris biographer Tom Bower on the way, but it's time now for Big Witty Style. And Boris Johnson said he regrets being denied the chance to continue to deliver the vast mandate given to him by the British public. But the ousted PM declared his pride at what his government has achieved since that landslide victory in 2019.
Of course, I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine.
So, former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe with me now live. Anne, will Boris Johnson's legacy be delivering Brexit, something his predecessor failed to do?
It should be, but a great deal depends on what happens next. If we get a Remainer replacing him, I don't think for one moment the question's going to be reopened as to do we rejoin the EU. I don't think that. But any really Remain-minded Prime Minister could start making enormous concessions over Northern Ireland, over some of our economic deals, and could undermine Brexit that way. So in order to secure a lasting legacy for Boris, we do really need a proper Brexiteer there, not somebody who, sort of shilly-shallies and says, well, I was maybe Remain, maybe leave. We need a very clear, very committed Brexiteer there. Otherwise, I think that legacy is in danger, not of being lost, but of being severely watered down.
So, and for example, does that mean you wouldn't accept Liz Truss as a potential Prime Minister? I only ask because obviously we know that she voted to remain. But since that day, she absolutely accepted the result, and then she's done a very good job at securing, when she was International Trade Secretary, she did a very good job at securing free trade deals all around the world.
Liz Truss has been immensely competent at getting the trade deals. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. But I would have very severe doubts about her as a Prime Minister at this moment. I don't think she's got the strength of personality. I don't think she's got the charisma. I think she has got the competence. But you need a lot more than that to be Prime Minister. And so I wouldn't be going for her anyway.
Is there anyone exciting you, Anne?
No, absolutely not.
And that's the issue, isn't it? That is the issue.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the reasons, wasn't the principal reason, but it was one of the reasons why I wanted Boris to stay, because I simply couldn't see a successor. There's no king over the water. There's nobody around whom everybody is coalescing. And that does mean that we're going to have weeks and months of the Tory party fighting amongst itself and then deciding, with the general election sort of coming down the track towards it, then deciding what it's going to do. There'll be complete policy drift. Policy constipation, if you like, between now and the next leader coming in.
I know, it's just disastrous, Anne. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We're in the middle of a war. We now have a lame duck Prime Minister in place. And did you actually think it was a fair point today, Anne, when Boris said in his farewell address, look, this is an eccentric decision. I mean, he used the word eccentric. He clearly means a crazy decision, a mad decision, because actually he's mid-term only a few points behind Labour. I mean, some of the polls only have him a couple of points behind Labour.
Exactly. I mean, you know, the way that the Westminster Village sees this and the way that the BBC have been pressing this and the way that the country in general sees it, I think there are two completely different points of view. And I think at the moment everybody is assuming, well, there's only one view, you know, that Boris had to go and that Boris is a serial liar and that Boris is chaotic, which he is, admittedly, you know, and that is the only view. But actually, there are two views, and there'll be people tearing up their party membership cards, and I think that might come as a shock to some people who imagine there's one united view.
But Anne, what are we going to do about this? I mean, it's not just the BBC, but I think it's very wise for you to raise the BBC. I call them the Boris bashing corporation now, because they do a mea culpa each time after, you know, completely missing Brexit, completely missing the Red Wall. But Anne, if you had watched the BBC coverage over the past week as an outsider, you would think that 99.9% of the country hate Boris Johnson, that they want him removed. There is simply no balance in their coverage when it comes to the Prime Minister.
That is correct. And not only would you think it watching the BBC, but it's quite obvious the BBC thinks it itself. It's in that sort of mindset. It's in, if you like, what William Hague used to call the Hampstead liberal mindset. That's what it is. And it thinks that its view is a universal view. And it got a terrible shock over the referendum because it just didn't understand that actually there are two views in this country and not just the BBC's view. But we have got now a press and media in general, it's not just the Beeb, who go for the politics of personal destruction, the high drama, you know, the worst possible outcome to absolutely everything because that makes such good headlines. That's what they're all after. There is no responsibility out there. There is no sense of proportion. Let me give you a very good example. Everybody is saying, oh, well, Boris rushed in, tried to change the rules to save his friend Owen Paterson. They ignore the fact that there was then an inquiry by an appeal court judge who did recommend changes to the rules. You know, they ignore that bit completely and just focus on the fact, oh, well, you know, Boris was rushing in to save a friend. And this is where, and I've said it before on your programme, Boris went so wrong. He didn't have anybody in Downing Street who would say to him, quiet, Boris, quiet. You know, we've got to deal with this in a slightly different way. Otherwise, whatever you're thinking, Boris, it's going to look as if you're thinking something completely different. Nobody took on that role after Dominic.
Very good point. Anne Whittaker, love your analysis as ever. Thank you so much, and we'll speak next week. But coming up, as slippery Starmer threatens a vote of no confidence if Boris doesn't walk away immediately, should he leave Downing Street in favour of a caretaker Prime Minister? Some have even suggested Theresa May should be back in there. I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panellists. Media Buzz continues at 10. Plus, actually, we're going to have loads of front pages in too. They're coming in early today, so we'll have them after the news at 10. But first, with Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP hoping to capitalise on the self-inflicted Conservative carnage, can the Tory party prevent a coalition of chaos without Boris in charge? Tory grandee David Mellor gives his unmissable verdict in The Outsider next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GBNews, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A first look at how tomorrow's newspaper front pages are covering Boris Johnson's resignation in just a moment. But first, former Conservative Minister David Mellor is tonight's outsider. It didn't take long for the lefty Liberal coalition of woke to start making their moves just hours after the PM said he would quit. Here's one-trick pony scheming Sturgeon blabbing earlier today about how chaos at number 10 proves the case for Scotland's independence after being asked who should run the country.
The very idea that you're putting that legitimate question to me, if not Boris Johnson, then who? Is it Dominic Raab? For me, really does underline this point. Scotland wouldn't choose any of these people to be Prime Minister. And that's the problem here. We're looking at this Westminster system and the chaotic Westminster system that it's become, and it doesn't represent what Scotland, or a majority of people in Scotland, want, believe or value, and that's not going to change with the departure of Boris Johnson. The Westminster system is broken, and it's that system that we need an alternative to for Scotland.
The wet Conservatives behind Boris's demise were warned more than once. Toppling him has left the door open for a Lib, Labour, SNP, Green coalition from hell that gives the now wounded Conservatives yet another headache to deal with. And let's not forget it will be puppet master Tony Blair pulling the strings from behind the scenes. David Mellor, who served as Chief Secretary to the Treasury under John Major, said rightly this week it would mean endless left-wing rule and the punishment of the middle classes, an end to social mobility and aspiration, ever higher taxes, and it would almost certainly mean another Euro referendum with all the misery and division that would bring. And David joins me now live. So, David, how did the Tories stop that perilous outcome?
Comment. Didn't hear who the bloke was who made it, though, Dan.
No, I'm with you. But Boris is now gone. So how does a new Tory leader manage to stop that outcome when the party now, David, seems to be in the midst of a civil war?
Yes, yeah, they are. But, you know, I have to say one thing. You know, I would love what Boris said he was going to do at the last election. I'd love it if that had been done. So there's no difference between us on that. But I can exclusively reveal to you the person responsible for Boris's demise. Would you like me to tell you?
Go on.
His name is Boris Johnson.
Thought you might say that, David.
No, but you see, look, let's think about this. The BBC have been a pain in the nether regions for the Conservatives all the years I've been involved in politics.
Yeah, but this was another level. This was another level.
But Margaret Thatcher not only said the right things most of the time, but Margaret Thatcher also got on with it. And Bernard Ingham, her press secretary, wouldn't allow her to read the papers or watch the television. He gave her a digest of what she needed to know. Now, the problem with Boris is that he was he was just, not able to implement what he said he was going to do, because Boris is not an implementer, and he should have had people around him who could have done that. But even worse, Boris just allowed himself to appear to be a man totally lacking in a moral compass. So you had all those parties and Partygate, which were gravely damaging. So he was, what he was telling everyone else, they couldn't even see a dying relative because of the curse of COVID. He was running the gardens of Number 10 like it was a Chicago speakeasy under prohibition. And then you get all this nonsense about Mr. Pincher. What on earth made him think that Pincher was a suitable man to be in his government, even as Under-Secretary for Latrines?
But do you think that's big enough? Do you think the Pincher scandal, do you think the Pincher scandal, though, really is really big enough to bring down a Prime Minister elected with an 80-seat landslide majority just 3 years ago?
It's what It's what when I was in the law, and you were dealing with a dodgy motor car, whatever you called a congeries of defects. It's a congeries of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I
propagated by the media, though.
Yeah, but the thing about Boris, it was a phrase I came across, a description of someone in Churchill's time, where somebody said there wasn't just a skeleton in his cupboard. They were hanging like candelabra throughout his...
Yes, but we accepted that.
Boris, it wasn't one thing, it was something else. So I just think as Conservatives, we have to stop being paranoid. I know, as Henry Kissinger once said, even paranoids have enemies, but the truth of the matter is that Boris Johnson will go to his grave surely kicking himself that he failed to get a grip. The Boris that was describing himself today was a Boris who was totally dedicated to doing all the things he said he would do. The real Boris was something very different. Chaotic number 10, an inability to implement what he said he was going to do. Look, we talk about delivering Brexit. I hate the EU. I've always hated the EU. David Young, bless him, once said to me, "When did you start hating the EU?" I said, "When I started to go to Brussels." And he said, "Me too." But so, I'm not on any different side of the fence, but I just think delivering Brexit is not passing a bill in Parliament. Delivering Brexit is getting rid of all the EU rules and all the stuff. You know the story.
Yes,
Boris,
but David, looking forward, how does the Tory party now manage to end this civil war and stop the dreaded coalition that you wrote about in the Mail? Because to me, the chances of that happening have now increased, not decreased.
I'm glad you read that coalition piece, because the Lib Dems, when they went into coalition with the Conservatives, all they asked for was a referendum. They then got, I think, 28% of the vote or whatever for electoral reform. So now they want electoral reform, but the public are not allowed to have any part in that. And once you get electoral reform, you end up where the Lib Dems become like the Free Democrats in Germany, and they can go 30 years and they're in government, just deciding, changing a partner from time to time. But okay, you asked me, and I know we haven't got endless time. The first thing we've got to do is do something about this awful 3 months interregnum. There's no point in pretending that Boris from beyond the grave, as it were, could be a saviour. So the first thing that has to happen is the Tories have got to get on with electing the leader. Now, the problem is, at the moment, it's like a selling plate at Fontwell with, everybody except my mum or your mum, and my mum sadly gone to a better place, standing. Why the hell don't they have the sense to work out who are the credible people and let them get on with it? And then they get on with it. So why do we have to wait until October to get a new Tory leader? Now, once we've got a new Tory leader, the question is, obviously, it has to be the right leader. I think it's got to be someone who, first of all, will convince the public as to their integrity and competence, and secondly, will want to do the right job. And I think,
David Mellor, we're going to have to continue this conversation next week, but very good points as ever. Thank you so much, David. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, this momentous and, for many of us, tragic day in which Boris Johnson stepped down as Prime Minister is almost at an end.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
But the Westminster chaos is only just beginning, with the Tories torn about whether Boris can hold on until the autumn and a gloating Starmer threatening a confidence vote should the PM leave Downing Street in favour of a caretaker Prime Minister. I'll debate that next with my superstar panel, broadcaster Mike Parry, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and author and journalist Amy Nicole. We'll find out how the first of tomorrow's newspapers react to the resignation in just a few minutes too. Did the meddling of Carrie Johnson, the Liberal voice in the PM's heir, contribute to his downfall? That's the view of Boris biographer Tom Bauer. He'll be here live at 10:20. As former PM Sir John Major calls for Conservative Party members to be excluded from the leadership ballot, are Tory Ramona's already trying to influence policy? I'll debate this with a woman who knows Major well. Former Conservative Minister Edwina Curry is uncancelled at 10:40. As backbench Remainer Tom Tugendhat joins Steve Baker and Suella Braverman in becoming the first major Tory names to publicly announce they're planning to run for the top job. My panel have whittled down their top two candidates in a Dan Wootton Tonight leadership contest. And as the apparently impartial media erupts with unbridled joy over Boris going, I'll name and shame the very worst offenders.
We've had people on his own side who did support him merely weeks ago who are saying it's over. And it is over.
Goodbye, Boris Johnson, and may we never look upon your like again.
All that and more coming up in the Media Buzz. Plus, Boris faces stiff competition from a Beatle to be named tonight's Greatest Britain. Find out if I bestowed the PM with the consolation prize in the GBUJ finale of the week at 10:50. But before all of that, the news first with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. Speaking outside Number 10, he admitted feeling deeply saddened, but said it was the will of his party. His decision to step down follows 3 days of government revolt that's seen almost 60 MPs, including 5 cabinet ministers, quit. Boris Johnson will now continue to serve as Prime Minister until the party chooses his successor, which is expected to happen by October.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. I know that there will be many people who are relieved and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
Following his resignation speech, Boris Johnson tweeted his thanks to the British public, saying it was an immense privilege to serve as their Prime Minister. He also pledged to continue serving in their best interests until his replacement is appointed. However, Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says Boris Johnson should step down immediately.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, should be the caretaker Prime Minister, whilst the Conservatives choose their next leader. Once he or she's been elected, there should be a general election, so the British public have the choice of a fresh start, and I'll be campaigning for a Labour government led by Keir Starmer.
Well, earlier this evening, reporters asked former Health Secretary Sajid Javid whether he would be interested in replacing Boris Johnson as PM. His resignation was the first of dozens of government officials to abandon their post this week.
Evening, Sajid.
Good evening. How are you?
You
all right?
The top dog, Sajid?
Good evening.
Have you got a good team around you? Have you chosen a team?
Great evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Nothing else to say, Sajid? You going for the top dog, Sajid?
Speculation is rife over who will put themselves forward for the leadership competition. Those who've expressed their interest include Attorney General Suella Braverman and MP Tom Tugendhat. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock says whoever the next Tory leader is, they must attract broad support.
Next election is likely about 2 years from now. We need to deliver in that time, but then we've got to also be able to get the support that we need to form the administration after that.
To other news, and the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that the mother of baby P has now been released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son at their home in Tottenham. Baby P suffered more than 50 injuries, including fractured ribs. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab has condemned the decision to release her, saying the parole system needs a fundamental overhaul. And actor James Caan, who starred as gangster Sonny Corleone in the Godfather movie, has died at the age of 82. His family announced the news on Twitter, saying they appreciate the outpouring of love and heartfelt condolences. Caan was also well known for roles in Brian's Song, Misery and Elf. Actor Arnold Schwarzenegger has described him as an icon and a legend. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in, hot off the press. One story, of course, and The Independent leads with the headline, "Going, but still in number 10." As the paper claims concern is growing, the PM will remain in a caretaker role for months. We're going to explore that in a moment. Don't know why there's any concern over it. It's absolutely what should be happening. The Eye follows suit with another picture of Boris in front of number 10 earlier today under the headline "Downfall." The paper also reports that at least 11 Tories are considering leadership bids to become the UK's next PM. The Daily Mirror are still clinging on to Partygate. Just let it rest. You won, guys. You won. They say Boris is clinging on for one last party, reportedly a lavish wedding bash at Chequers later this month. Who cares? The Metro leads with a tongue-in-cheek jab at the Brexiteer slogan, "Leave means leave." The paper notes how Boris failed to use the word resign. I mean, the thing is, he didn't make the rules. These are the rules. This is how the British political system works. My superstar panel back with me now, broadcaster Mike Parry, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and journalist and author Amy Nicole. And breaking tonight, former Cabinet Minister Dr Liam Fox has said Boris Johnson should be able to remain in post until his successor is announced. Fox cited David Cameron and Theresa May as precedents for remaining in number 10 until their replacements took over. But Boris is facing a growing revolt over his reasonable and responsible decision to stay on as PM until his successor is found. Several senior Tories have reportedly blasted him, staying put, suggesting Deputy PM Dominic Raab, who earlier ruled himself out of the leadership contest, should take over as a caretaker PM. Labour leader Slippery Starmer also gave Boris an unwelcome ultimatum, threatening to call a no-confidence vote if he doesn't leave imminently.
Obvious he's unfit to be Prime Minister. That's been blindingly obvious for a very, very long time. And if they don't get rid of him, then Labour will step up in the national interest and bring a vote of no confidence, because we can't go on with this Prime Minister clinging on for months and months to come.
But the PM wasted no time in getting on with governing the country through crises at home and abroad, filling the vacant post in his cabinet after the wave of betrayals yesterday. Greg Clark replaces serial snake Michael Gove as Levelling Up Secretary. James Cleverly is now Education Secretary. And Robert Buckland unexpectedly returns to the cabinet as Wales Secretary. In a sign of the party's distance from reality, the PM's predecessor, Theresa May, has been touted as a possible caretaker in number 10. Earlier, she called for the successor to Boris to, quote, heal divisions.
I think the key thing that a new Prime Minister needs to do is to seek to heal division. And that's to heal division in the country and, speaking as a Conservative, heal division in our party.
So is nominating a temporary caretaker cabinet led by someone like Theresa May really the best thing for the country right now, Sean Bailey?
It's absolute nonsense. If the whole idea is to help the country run properly, then we should use a system that we've traditionally used. Look, if you wanted Boris to leave, he's leaving. 3 months just means we can do it properly. And if you're like John Major, who thinks the members should be taken out of the voting system, look, John Major's shown himself to be a fool, because they'd be the very same members you'd then go back and ask to campaign for you, and they simply wouldn't. It's part of our democratic system.
But he wants a Remainer in there. That's what.
But look, what he wants, he cannot have, because the country have spoken. And this is my point. Whatever happens with Boris, and he should stay in position until we find a new leader, we must make sure that leader, whoever they are, Remainer or not, does not unwind Brexit. What if that does? It just means that the southern elites of this country, the likes of the chattering classes in Islington, have won on a deep...
Perfect point to go to Amy Nicole, given she is part of that chattering class.
I live in Hertfordshire.
Amy, do you think Boris should stay as caretaker Prime Minister?
No, I don't, because what we'll all agree with here is that we do need a fully functioning government right now. And I think with Boris at the helm of it, it's completely untenable, because it's going to put the cabinet in a precarious position, because how is it going to fill all the positions when half the country, yeah, that's fine, half the country, half the cabinet, half the party can't stand the man. So I think if we need a strong government at this moment, we just give it over to Dominic Raab. When Boris was poorly with COVID, he did a fine job. Just let Dominic Raab do it, cut Boris now, and the country will be better.
Interestingly, Mike Parry, you're actually with Ms Nicole rather than Mr Bailey on this.
I'm with Amy on this one, for the reasons that she's pointed out. I want the country to get back to working full-time on all the massive issues that have got to be dealt with immediately. I can't see how we can let it drift over the summer, this 3-month hiatus until August and until the... What does he want? Does he want a big send-off at the party conference, you know, and I'm going to be there and you
But
send me
that's
off
the
and-
rules.
Yeah, but hang on.
Them the rules.
No. The 22 committee can get involved, can't they, and make this happen sooner rather than later.
Well, they shouldn't.
But they can.
Well, technically...
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but Mike, even the way our system works, our Westminster system works, there is no automatic or constitutional right for Dominic Raab to replace the Prime Minister, even though he holds the title of Deputy PM. So how do you choose the caretaker PM? Come on, that's going to cause another unnecessary civil war with no answer.
The strength that Dominic Raab's got is that he is the Deputy Prime Minister, right? But I don't want that to go on for 3 months. Now, you know, in the past, I think it was 40 days, wasn't it? It took Boris to get into power. After...
Yes, but that's because Andrea Leadsom pulled out of the leadership.
Yeah, she did. She pulled out, so the stage 2 and all that kind of stuff.
It just went straight to Theresa May.
But look...
And that didn't work.
It's
Mike,
not beyond the wit of man to speed this up.
But Mike, you understand, though, that is why Theresa May didn't work as Prime Minister. And hear me out on this. Because what happened, Andrea Leadsom pulled out of the race. That meant Tory members didn't get an opportunity to have a proper vote, and Theresa May was a failed Prime Minister, Mike. So you want the same thing to happen now?
No, I don't. I want it to happen much faster.
But how do you do it much faster?
Because Boris has got to step down. Boris has got to say...
But there still has to be a caretaker PM.
There's got to be a caretaker PM, but it doesn't have to take 40 days. It can be done much quicker. We have got hundreds of problems in this country.
Let me say this.
But this is why they should never have booted Boris out.
I agree, but we've got problems we've got to sort out.
Let me say this. I agree with you. We have very serious problems that need to be addressed.
Yes.
But what you're suggesting will make it even longer before those problems are addressed. But most crucially, it means you may get a Prime Minister who doesn't have the support of the Cabinet, which means those problems would last for 2 or 3 and 4 years.
He doesn't have the support.
Hold on. The system exists to make sure you can get a leader who has some authority to deliver on it.
If you want to keep Boris where he is, you're weakening the party that you all...
It's not about the party. It's about the country. It's not about the party.
It's about the country.
If you keep Boris in post now, you are literally weakening the Conservative Party further.
Guys, there is a process as to how the Tory leader is elected. Now, you might not like that process, but it's written into the party's constitution. And it has to be followed, which is why what May just said is just a complete joke. It's part of the Constitution. There is no process as to how to choose a caretaker Prime Minister.
It's not about the process. It's about why the process exists. The last thing you want is another group of people who are going to squabble. You want someone to deliver. And hold on, a completely separate point is, have you met the civil service? They pack up. They will not be around in August.
We've got a completely inert country.
Do you think it's good that it's summer?
We've got completely inert country for the next 3 months. If we just say to ourselves...
Not true.
Right, we'll just think about it until the autumn.
Not true. We don't have to have
then we'll be
Boris has a new cabinet in place.
We'll be taking advantage of...
OK, final word, Edwina Curry.
All I was going to say is actually the majority of his MPs want a caretaker. So, as in a caretaker PM.
True.
No, it is. And before he resigned this morning, the majority of people were saying when he does resign, we want to have a caretaker PM.
Now, in the last 48 hours, the supposedly impartial mainstream broadcast media could barely disguise their unbridled joy as their campaign to force Boris out as PM finally succeeded. He never stood a chance with this craven bunch, including the Boris Bashing Corporation. And I'm going to play you some of what they did later in the show. But stand by to my superstar panel, Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey and Mike Parry, because coming up as backbench Remainer Tom Tugendhat tonight joins Steve Baker and Suella Braverman in planning to run for the top job. Who should replace Boris Johnson as Tory party leader and Prime Minister? My superstar panel have whittled down the candidates to the final 2 for our very own leadership contest. And I'm going to bring you the latest on the odds too, plus more newspaper front pages. Oh, my goodness, they're going to be good. They're going to be good today. That's up to 10:30. But first, did the meddling of Carrie Johnson, the Liberal voice in the PM's ear, contribute to his downfall? That's the view of Boris biographer Tom Bauer, who will join us next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, as Boris Johnson announced his resignation in Downing Street today, among those looking on was his wife, Carrie, who was pictured carrying their 6-month-old daughter, Romy. The political activist is alleged to have been the driving force behind some of the PM's most controversial decisions and policies, particularly on the hot-button issues of climate change and gender ideology that were seen as a betrayal of Conservative values. Well, one man with the inside track on their relationship is investigative journalist Tom Bauer, who's written some of the most explosive biographies ever published on figures ranging from Prince Charles to Jeremy Corbyn. And in 2020, he published Boris Johnson, The Gambler, an expose on the work and home life of the outgoing PM, named as the Book of the Year by the Sunday Times, the Daily Telegraph and The Guardian. And Tom Bauer joins me now. So, Tom, I mean, look, it usually is never fair to blame the partner, right? Whether they are a man or a woman. So I'm loath to do it. But the difference with Carrie is she was intimately involved in policy, right?
Well, worse than that, she actually determined who should be in the building and who shouldn't. I mean, the row between her and Dominic Cummings will, I think, by historians be seen as one of the great mistakes of Boris's reign, that he allowed her effectively to drive her out over the Allegra Stratton appointment, the spokesman woman, and she was a disastrous appointment idea. I think it's more than the point about I've gone into the whole problem of Carrie. I mean, she really did turf Marina out of the marriage. She paraded herself with Boris when they were having an affair, and Marina put up with a hell of a lot, but just she was being so openly humiliated. And I think the problem with Carrie is she was a disaster at Conservative Central Office. They asked her to leave for all sorts of reasons. She's a very needy person. She's someone who doesn't bring stability. And I do think when historians come to look at why Boris failed, and he did fail because he came in 2019 with such promise and such hopes of so many people, I think that it will be the destruction of his family life and home life, where Carrie, for example, insisted that they had to have Wilfred in bed with them as a baby, that Boris had to change the nappies during the night, that this whole ridiculous way of life for a prime minister, which is totally inappropriate, Carrie imposed on him. And I think it was her megalomania, in effect, her lack of reason. I mean, the stories about the wallpaper, of course, is much worse. Wasting
and more of that
coming out tonight. I mean,
right?
Just extraordinary waste of money on one of the most expensive home designers in London. It was just madness by Carrie, spending money which she should have known that Boris didn't have. And this idea of the treehouse for 120,000 in Chequers. Her behaviour in Chequers was terrible. And I think the whole point is that Boris is a person, which I've now discovered more and more, in search of love. He is deprived, really. He was deprived as a child in many ways and deprived throughout his whole life as this loner, this man looking for relationships. So he clings on to women. I always think the way in which he clung on to Carrie's hand when he went in St. Paul's for the Jubilee celebrations and when he went in the other day in Kigali It's a man who really is alone, and he needed someone who is stable. And the problem with Carrie is she's not stable. She is very much, it's all about her. And I think this has been the problem. And I must tell you, I was listening to you just now, Dan, about why he doesn't leave Downing Street earlier.
What do you think he should
Well, I think, of course, he should leave very quickly. But the problem is he hasn't got a home to go to. It was the same problem with foreign. It was the same when he was foreign minister. He hung around in Carlton Gardens for 3 weeks when he should have left after 3 hours. And I think this story about he wants checkers for a party is exactly the reason. And, you know, he hasn't got a car even, he has nothing. And he hasn't got a woman who says, I will organise the domestic life.
He can make a lot of money now.
He'll make a fortune. He'll write. Now, the point about his memoirs is they could be unbelievable if he's honest. If he says, why did it go wrong? Or the row with Cummings, or the row with the other people. It could be sensational.
What was interesting tonight, though, is I spoke to someone who remains close to Boris Johnson, and they said he is still the best man to lead Britain. And there is a sense emerging from people close to Boris that he hasn't actually accepted that this is the end of his frontline political career.
Absolutely. I thought there were no tears like May. There was no churlish resignation, shrug of the shoulders like Cameron. It was a defiant speech. It was the speech that said, this is the end of one chapter, but the book is still to be written. Another chapter will be
Will he stay
opened.
as an MP, do you think?
I think he will stay as an MP. He won't obviously play a role. He won't sulk like May does against his successor. He'll get on with his books. He's got the Shakespeare book as well, which he got $500,000 for. He'll write a column again for a newspaper. He'll get on with earning the money he needs.
And is that Shakespeare book actually written? Because there were rumours he was working on it even during his time as
Prime
PM.
Minister, in Mustique. No, he's got people who prepared the material. It'll come up very quickly. He'll have enough money very quickly, which is why he stopped worrying about money. No, I think that he is defiant. And I've been thinking about his defiance today, and you know, it was so foolish of him to lie about Pincher. It was so foolish of him to get the Partygate lies out. It was madness. But in the end, it's his defiance. It is what he learned. I've described it before to you, that terrible, terrible child he had looking at Stanley, his father, beating his mother and lying about the adultery and all this sort of thing. And the defiance today was just as the lies about Pincher or Partygate. He is never going to give way. He is never going to give his enemies, his critics, the material to attack him. And today I think we saw the real tough Boris, who we thought we'd elected in 2019, who we thought was going to pursue with vision and with resilience and strength and energy his agenda. So I think that's going to come back at a later stage.
But Tom, interestingly, you actually think the history books will view him far more favourably than is being discussed at the moment.
I do, because in the end he got an 80 majority. He got Brexit done, whether you're for or against it. It was a referendum result. He did very well in COVID. He had to fight really left-wing scientists who were urging him to close down the country forever and all the rest of it. He then lost his way. I think he lost his way because of COVID and long COVID, because of Carrie, because he just didn't appoint the right people, and he didn't understand how awful the civil service is. And Simon Case, the cabinet secretary, is really one of the worst appointments he could ever have made. And I think he'll rue the day, and that's why he'll come back in a few years. And I think to some extent he looked at Churchill.
Well, Churchill would come back and he would believe that he could be Prime Minister again?
I think of course he'd believe it.
And Churchill's his hero,
well,
right?
Of course, and Churchill was kicked out after Gallipoli, struggled back, then warned the country. Same age. I mean, you know, he undoubtedly thinks the country will want him back at a later stage.
So there could be a second act of...
Oh, there'll be many acts to come. He is not going to go quietly, and he's too big a beast. And Boris's greatest weakness throughout the last couple of years was, has he learned from his mistakes? And the tragedy for him is he didn't learn from his mistakes, and worse, didn't have anybody like a solid wife to say, these are your mistakes. She just kept on pouring more fuel on the flames.
Do you think that relationship will last?
I don't. And I just wish he'd go back to Marina. I just wish he'd find a way in which he could find a solid life. But the trouble is, as I said in this a little earlier, he's searching for love. He is really emotionally deprived. A very senior cabinet minister who resigned said that to me, that in the end, that is the secret weakness of Boris, the search for love.
Tom Bower, Absolutely fascinating. Tom Bauer, Boris biographer, predicting there will be a second political act for Boris Johnson. Thank you so much, Tom. Coming up, as former PM Sir John Major calls for Conservative Party members to be excluded from the leadership ballot, paving the way for a Tory wet to take power. Are Ramona's already trying to influence policy? I'll debate this with a woman who knows Major pretty well. Former Conservative Minister Edwina Curry, uncancelled at 10:40. But first, with Tom Tugendhat tonight throwing his hat into the ring, alongside Steve Bacon-Swallow-Braverman, who should replace Boris as Tory party leader and Prime Minister. My superstar panel whittle down the runners and riders to their top two. In the Media Buzz next, we'll have more newspaper reactions to the PM's ousting then too.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Tomorrow's news tonight now in the Media Buzz. And you know, these are when the newspaper front pages really matter, right? Historic front pages today. This is my favourite. The Daily Mail asks, on behalf of so much of the nation, what the hell have they done? Sharing a picture of Boris, Carrie and son Wilf embracing inside number 10. The paper states corks will be popping in Brussels and Moscow. And up there, the headline at the top by the masthead, Day Tories lost their marbles. The Guardian, by contrast, it's over. They say Boris was unrepentant. The Daily Telegraph splashes a photograph of the PM with his son Wilfred after making his resignation speech. They claim that Boris's long goodbye will leave the UK in a state of paralysis as senior Tories urge him to appoint a new caretaker to avoid months of political uncertainty.
Yeah, we agree.
And the Daily Star, gosh, they're mean, aren't they? Daily Star, they've poked fun with a mock list of his legacy as PM. And there's three things there: got a cute dog, good party organiser and nice wallpaper. I think they left out Brexit. And finally, the patriotic Daily Express leads with the simple yet emphatic message: thank you, Boris, you gave Britain back its freedom. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, the broadcaster Mike Parry, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and the journalist and author Amy Nicol. Now, breaking tonight, backbench Remainer Tom Tugendhat has confirmed he is considering standing for the Tory leadership following the resignation of Boris Johnson. And you can bet your bottom dollar a raft of other Tory MPs were already plotting their own bids before Boris had even stepped foot at the lectern this morning. It's reported tonight that at least 11 planning to run. A Snap YouGov poll of Tory members puts Defence Secretary Ben Wallace top of the popularity pile, but some big favourites with Tory grassroots were not included in the survey. Brexit hardman Steve Baker was one of them. A vocal anti-lockdown, who I love, was relentless in pushing for our EU exit. Here's what he told GBNews earlier today.
I've said I have to think about it seriously. Your viewers will know that in the course of the last 7 out of 12 years I've been an MP, I have actually provided leadership in moments of crisis over Brexit, over COVID, over race relations and indeed over net zero. So I've got to face up to the reality that Conservative home readers routinely put me in the top 10 for next leader, sometimes in the top 5. That's very honouring and I need to take it seriously. So I'm going to reflect on whether I should run.
Yes. Run, Steve Baker. I want you to run. Attorney General Suella Braverman, another Brexit Spartan who is likely to appeal to the Tory base with her no-nonsense, anti-woke capabilities. This is what she told Peston last night.
A number of your colleagues have actually said that they wondered whether you, as and when the time comes for a leadership election, might think about standing.
I'll be straight with you, Robert. Yes, I will. If there is a leadership contest, I will put my name into the ring. I love this country. My parents came here with absolutely nothing, and it was Britain that gave them hope, security and opportunity. And this country's afforded me incredible opportunities in education and in my career.
I have to be honest, I think she's brilliant, actually. I think she's really brilliant. Meanwhile, the bookies
called out the civil service, didn't she?
She does call out the civil service, Mike, all the time. Meanwhile, the bookies have all the typical Tory bigwigs as frontrunners in the betting markets. Rishi Sunak must have thought his political career was over just a few months ago amid the scandal over his wife's tax affairs, but he's second favourite behind Ben Wallace to take the top job. Meanwhile, staunch Vote Leave campaigner Penny Mordaunt is third favourite. They are ahead of Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Tugendhat and departing Health Secretary Sajid Javid, who sparked this whole affair with his resignation this week. Nadeem Zahawi, who was made Chancellor for Boris for only a couple of hours before calling on him to resign, he's a long shot at around 16-1. So what will Tory members think of his loyalty, I guess? Jeremy Hunt, who once said he admired China's zero-COVID policy and snake in the grass Michael Gove, rank outsiders who the Tory faithful would no doubt ever stomach. So, OK, my superstar panel have been working on this today. Mike Parry, who are the two people that you would like to be on the runoff? Because, of course, that's where we're going to end up. The MPs are going to choose two people for the public to vote, for the Tory members to vote on.
Absolutely. As it stands at the moment, Nadeem Zahawi, right, I love the idea that he came to this country at 9 years of age and didn't even speak English, right?
Okay.
Came from Iraq, and look where he is now, multimillionaire, successful businessman, knows how to run things, and also successful in politics. And the other guy, Ben Wallace. But Ben Wallace, of course, is a Remainer.
That's an issue.
This is the one problem we've got there. But I want to put something to Sean now. The guy I'd really love to see would be Lord Frost, OK? But Lord Frost, of course, is in the House of Lords. Now, can we not get some Tory MP just to vacate their seat, cause a by-election and get Lord Frost in? Because Lord Frost is the best possible bet the Tories could have.
Am I right? Agree.
Am I right?
Technically, what you're saying is possible, but...
Yes.
I mean, that's up to Lord Frost to find a very good friend to do that for him.
Yeah, well, exactly. But if he found there was support there, surely you'd lay your line on the, you'd lay your body on the line for the party, and you'd cop out.
Such an amazing
he
Prime
would be
Minister.
fantastic.
Really
Look at him. He quit. I mean, the alarm bell should have rung there when he quit and said, "It's not working. I'm not being given the support I need, and there is not enough dynamism in trying to get Brexit
he was
going."
so good on COVID as well as Brexit.
Absolutely.
Let me just say the one challenge that I think Lord Frost might have, which the Tories would have, is a broad appeal. So to a certain group of people who are into politics or who identify with him on a physical level or policy level, he might be streets ahead. But I wonder if he'd be a broad appeal, because one of the greatest challenges to Tories is inner city votes, young people votes and women.
So Sean, who are your two favourites?
So look, I picked Tom Tugendhat. Yes, he was a Remainer, which is a little bit of a problem for me, but I think he's trustworthy.
Huge problem for me.
But Tom is trustworthy. He believes in Britain. He's a very sharp character, and he doesn't carry any of the baggage of the old crew. And I've also picked James Cleverly because he is a leaver. People love James. He's a real man of the people. And again, he doesn't carry any of the baggage, but he does have the experience. I will say, though, Suella and the like they do look...
Suella, I think, is wonderful.
But do you know what this shows is the wonderful...
very exciting. She could be the Thatcher, the one who no one expects.
There's two things to be said. the Tories often pick an outsider who then goes on to win the election.
But she's an outsider for this, right?
And I'd say this as well. We have a large amount of talent, which is why we should be running the country and not Labour.
I loved her honesty, by the way. Amy, this is difficult for you, I imagine, but who do you want to be Prime Minister?
Yeah, no, it's difficult. It's like I'm looking at the menu, but I know everything on it's going to give me food poisoning. So
You want somebody who's going to lose, don't you? You want somebody who's going to lose the next election.
Well,
you could sabotage it,
because
couldn't
they
you?
have to run the country for the next 2 years. And I'm looking at all the candidates and I'm going, yeah, but you hate poor people. Oh, you want to cull the badges. Oh, you don't like disabled people. So it's really, really hard. So
Oh yes, all of those Tories running around who just hate disabled people.
I think one of the front runners actually wants to cut disability allowance. But anyway. So, in the end, I went with Jeremy Hunt because I think he could sort out Brexit. And then I couldn't think of a second one, so I just went for Matt Hancock because at least we know that he's passionate.
It's had you jabbed there. But do you know why I think that is,
The
Amy?
evil egg.
I've got some breaking news for you, which I'm just going to celebrate. Actually, can you get your little hooter out,
where's my
please?
party poppin'?
Oh, you've lost your party poppin'. Matt Hancock has tonight revealed he will not be running for Tory party.
You had me there. I was a little bit nervous.
And that is something that the whole country can celebrate. Now, let's be honest, the PM never stood a chance with the craven MSM, including the Boris bashing corporation, out for his blood. Look at this.
There was no hint that he feels he's done anything wrong. The closest he came to describing the events that led him out was he said, politics follows the herd, but he didn't go into, whether or not they were right or wrong.
You remember that Theresa May came out, and you remember that she lost her voice.
She did.
She was so emotional.
Apparently she was at the opera earlier on in the
She
week. It was a
was.
Greek tragedy. Make of that what you will.
We've had people on his own side who did support him merely weeks ago who are saying it's over. And it is over.
I'm almost grateful to Boris Johnson there for just reminding us at the end that all of the words I used to describe him are fair and accurate and in some ways not even adequate, because he is utterly reprehensible, utterly vile, utterly despicable. Goodbye, Boris Johnson, and may we never look upon your like again.
This is where all the veins meet the air.
Yeah, those were the news night closing credits yesterday. As I said, all just a game to them, and they won. That's the disturbing thing, they won. Now, self-proclaimed man of the people Slippery Starmer has been celebrating Boris Johnson's bombshell departure today by hobnobbing with fellow champagne socialists at Wimbledon. On one of the most turbulent days in UK political history, Slippery Starmer was living it up in the Royal Box, watching the women's singles semi-finals match. Just before his posh tennis outing, the leader of no opposition was adding fuel to the Tory Civil War fire, saying Bojo should not be allowed to linger in Downing Street, vowing to table a vote of no confidence if he refuses to hand over to a caretaker PM. But Starmer soon put all of that to one side and did a bit of lingering himself on his wife's lips as he was spotted smooching his other half, Victoria, rubbing shoulders with establishment toffs and generally having a right old jolly, far away from the Westminster drama. Well, I say, laugh it up, live it up while you can, Mr. Starmer, because the Durham police could be serving you with a fine any day now, and then it will be game, set and match for you too. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Mike Parry, do stand by, because coming up, he's lost the title of Prime Minister, but will Boris Johnson be named as the final greatest Briton of the week? GBUJ coming up. I guess that will be a bit of a consolation prize for him, perhaps. But next, as former PM Sir John Major calls for Conservative Party members to be excluded from the Tory leadership ballot, paving the way for a wet replacement to Boris, our Tory Ramona's already trying to influence policy. Edwina Curry, the Tory grand dame, she's uncancelled in a matter of seconds. First, though, a flavour of Monday's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, with Boris Johnson forced to step down after being betrayed by his own politicians, the country is rudderless and the government in ruins. As the dust settles and the battle to become the new big dog starts in earnest, top newsmakers, analysts and political figures will be on hand alongside GB News favourite Neil Oliver and superstar panellists Christine Hamilton, Benjamin Butterworth and Tonya Buxton to make sense of the uncertainty sparked by the Westminster power vacuum. That's on Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, arch-Ramoners have been on Boris's case since day one, but they're still up to their meddling ways, even though he's toppled. There is now a clear bid by the Tory elites to take power away from Conservative members in a party leadership contest by picking a winner amongst themselves. Tory grassroots would never vote for a wet China admirer like Jeremy Hunt or a distal snake like Michael Gove, but by taking ordinary Britons out of the occasion, that's exactly who the country could end up with. Former PM Sir John Major made his own unwelcome intervention today with a letter to the chair of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. The Ramona-in-Chief said Conservative Party members should be excluded from the new leadership ballot in what would mark an extraordinary change of the traditional rules. His letter read, for the overall well-being of the country, Mr Johnson should not remain in Downing Street. In the unique and pressing circumstances of the moment, the 1922 committee should arrange for the new leader of the party to be elected solely by MPs, with the winner being installed as PM and then endorsed by party members. Well, former Conservative Minister Edwina Curry joins me now. Edwina, I mean, look, you were with the Tory grassroots earlier in the week. You're with them all the time. They simply wouldn't accept not getting a vote on the next Tory leader, would they?
I'm one of the minions. I'm one of the many minions, Dan, who expects to be able to vote on who the leader is. My old mate Page is turning into a bit of a prat, really, isn't he? What a daft thing to say. What an undemocratic thing to say. Who does he think works for all the members of Parliament who get elected and all the councillors who get elected? We do. We're the ones that put the leaflets through the doors and go and knock and talk to everybody and do the Facebook pages and raise the money and all that kind of thing. Sir John, Knight of the Garter, has clearly forgotten what democracy is all about. Of course we're going to have a vote and we will have our say in due course. The quicker the better, in my view, Dan. Yeah. What I would very much like the 22 committee to do is make sure that they have whittled down this enormous number of candidates by the time Parliament goes into recess, which is the 21st of July. So they haven't got long.
Wow.
But they can.
But Edwina, how can they do it so quickly? I mean, at the moment, there's something like 11 candidates, but there's lots of unexpected candidates too. Like, who would have thought Suella Braverman is going to launch a bid, for example?
Well, I think some of them are on the basis of, if I stick my neck over the parapet, I will get asked to join the next cabinet. That tells you something about their own self-confidence as whether they actually have any talent or ability. Some of them will actually struggle to get 8 people to sign the ballot papers. They've got to do that. And the 22 committee can be quite strict about it. Well, they could change the rules. They could say you can't stand unless you've got 20 signatures. That would probably get the numbers down, and it would be a much quicker process to get to the point where the minions, us, the people who pay our subs and do all the hard work, actually get to have some say. And my own feeling is that then we could have the hustings during August, and we could have a choice in place by first week in September. That would give the new Prime Minister the chance to sort out some policies, decide what they're going to do, and then we'll have party conference season and we'll all cheer.
Edwina, I mean, this is fascinating though, right? I mean, it's a bit like the 70s when there wasn't an obvious candidate and Margaret Thatcher surprised everyone. So can you see a Thatcher lurking somewhere amongst these potential candidates? Who's exciting you, Edwina?
I think my preference would be for Dishy Rishi with one proviso. One proviso being that his wife has got to give up her non-dom status. You cannot have the Prime Minister of a country whose wife is officially domiciled in another country. That's a no. But I like the fact that he tries to keep tabs on how much we are borrowing. He is very tough on spending. You feel that, any concession into granting more money, Boris has pushed him. And Boris is not always right on that. I'm pretty Thatcherite when it comes to finance. I'm socially liberal. I'm very relaxed about who you marry and who, all that kind of stuff. But it seems to me that our country really needs a bit of firm management as far as the economy is concerned, unless we're going to leave a really horrible legacy in future. So Rishi would be one. And I like Ben Wallace. I hear what was said about him being a Remainer.
I worry about that, Edwina, I do.
I don't worry about that. I don't worry about that because I think we've moved on. We have got Brexit. We are secure in that. Even slippery Keir Starmer says that they would accept that. And I can't see that any future leader of the Conservative Party is going to go back on that. So I think we're secure. And I like the fact that he's a tough guy. You know, he's
He's a hard man. He's a proper hard man, and he said this week, don't be ridiculous, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not resigning, I'm not buying into your parlour games. And I have to say, he earned a lot of respect from me for the way that he's dealt with this week, Edwina, compared to a lot of them in the Cabinet. Edwina, can I just get your reaction to Boris's departure today? What did you make of the speech, and how are you feeling about it? Because for a long time, like me, you have been very loyal to Boris, but you wavered a little bit, didn't you, over the past week?
I got quite exasperated over the weekend, last time we were talking, Dan, because I felt the whole Pincher thing should never have happened. You know, you've got to stay on board with some of the things that upset people. And one of the things that upsets people is when you get extremely drunk in the Carlton Club. The Carlton Club, you know, the inner sanctum of the party. And then you start filling up the young men who are there. That's utterly irresponsible. And he should never have been a chief whip. The man clearly has two problems. One is alcohol and the other is young men he's not related to. Let's put it as kindly as that. So that's something that should not have happened and shouldn't have been defended. But the worst thing of all, I think, was the Prime Minister actually saying to his own cabinet, I didn't know about all this, and then sending them out to the newspapers and to the
OK,
press.
so I agree that was bad, but what about his speech today, Edwina? Did you think he struck the right tone?
Well, he was very much Boris. I didn't like the reference to the herd. You know, the members of Parliament who elect you are not the herd, Boris. We are not the herd. We are not the minions. We are not to be dismissed in that sort of casual way. It would have been much better if he had recognised the hard work that was done by a lot of the MPs. You know, he's been a remarkable figure in British politics for more than a decade. Absolutely remarkable. And I love the idea that was raised earlier that he might actually come back. Perhaps when he's matured a little bit. You never know with these things. It would be very exciting to see him doing an extremely good job at some point in the future. But not now, Boris, not now. Go.
Well, Edwina Curry, we're going to be talking lots as this Tory leadership contest unfolds in the weeks to come. And even though I'm very sad about Boris going, my goodness, it's going to be an exciting time. No summer recess here on Dan Wootton tonight. We're here throughout all of August because it's going to be an absolutely fascinating and historic time for British politics. Edwina Curry, thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain in Union Jackass. My superstar panel return. Mike Parry, who is your nomination for today's Greatest Britain?
It's Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr, the drummer from the Beatles, always undervalued in the contribution he made to the world's greatest ever band, is 82 years of age today. So we've all been celebrating Paul McCartney playing Glastonbury at 80 years of age. Ringo's 82. And he's still going strong.
An incredible man.
And you know, incredible man. A member of the world's greatest ever band.
Sean Bailey, your GB nomination. Who's your greatest Brit?
My greatest Britain nomination is Boris Johnson for making the big decisions and getting it right. His response to Ukraine, how he dealt with the pandemic, the greatest vaccine rollout in the world. We all know he isn't perfect, but he was a Prime Minister. He was working for us. And the other thing as well, he represented British voices up and down the country. That's a great thing.
Mm-hmm. And Amy Nicole, your greatest Britain nominee.
We all know he isn't perfect, being the understatement of the year. My greatest Britain is Eamon Holmes, our very own
Eamon,
for reigning victorious at the Trick
Go,
Awards
Eamon!
Yesterday.
This was an absolutely incredible moment, can I just say, because everyone in the mainstream media. Everyone in that room likes to deride GB News. There were terrible things said on stage. And there is Eamon Holmes, one of the biggest legends in the industry, getting up on stage and saying, ITV, Good Morning Britain, we are coming for you. And if you haven't watched Eamon Holmes with Isabel Webster in the morning on GB News, you really should, because it is a great way to wake up. And I have to say, this is so hard for me. Any other day, of course, Eamon Holmes, or of course, Ringo Starr would win Greatest Britain. But today it has to be Sean Bailey and it has to be Boris Johnson. Thank you, Boris, for delivering us Brexit. Union Jackass time now. Mike Parry, your nominee.
Yeah, it's not just one Union Jackass, it's a number of them. And they are the people who started, started sticking themselves to classic paintings. Now, I have a property in Suffolk, OK, very near to Dedham Vale, which, of course, was the scene of the Hay Wain, painted by John Constable, the greatest ever British painter, in my view. And for a couple of morons to go in there and jam their hands, to cement their hands, to glue their hands to even the frame of that magnificent painting shows not only utter disrespect for Constable and for the culture of this country, but it shows how thick and moronic they are.
I agree
Wearing
with you.
a shirt that says Stop Oil. If they stopped oil, you wouldn't have any clothes and you wouldn't have any soap and you wouldn't have been able to get there on a bus.
I'm with you.
Diesel.
I'm with you. Sean Bailey, your Union Jackass.
My Union Jackass is the BBC for their coverage and their sustained attack on the PM. We pay in the region of £3 billion to make that organisation work. And what we expect is unbiased reporting. We don't expect a political organisation. If that's what they want to do, it's time to get rid of the licence fee.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee for Union Jackass.
My nominee is Nadeem Zahawi. I might be naive with this, but I think he was appointed Chancellor by Boris Johnson, and then the following day he wrote a very public letter calling for his resignation. And I think this is pure politics, and it doesn't sit right with me at all.
It was weird. I completely am with you. Do you know what? This is so hard. Again, I could go with any of these three nominees as Union Jackass, but my goodness, after that impassioned address, it has to be Mike Parry and those complete losers and Just Stop Oil. They're middle-class champagne socialists and they must be stopped. Thank you so much to my fabulous superstar panel, Sean Bailey, Mike Parry and Amy Nicole. But today, the country lost a potentially great Prime Minister thanks to a relentless campaign by the people who think they really run the country. The establishment, the Ramona Blob and the MSM. But Boris Johnson delivered Brexit, despite their craven attempts to stop him. That will see him enter the history books. Good night.
Mr. Speaker, it is not too late to save Brexit.
And therefore I give notice that Boris Johnson is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Your hand may have quivered over the ballot paper as before you put your cross in the Conservative box. I'm humbled that you have put your trust in me and that you have put your trust in us. Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. This is the moment when the dawn breaks and the curtain goes up on a new act in our great national drama. And that is because we took the tough decisions and got the big calls right when, by the way, Labour was telling us to stay in lockdown. Yesterday I went, as we all must, to Peppa Pig World. I don't know if you've been to Peppa Pig World. Who's been to, hands up anyone who's been to Peppa Pig World? That I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. Staying dry for most of us over the next few days, plenty of sunshine, particularly across the south, and temperatures starting to rise as well. Taking a look at the pressure sequence, high pressure dominates our weather scene. It does sit to the southwest of us at the moment, meaning northwesterly winds just making a little bit cooler across the north and the west. But into the weekend, that high pressure moves in and temperatures start to rise. Through Thursday evening, plenty of clear skies. across England and Wales. This continues overnight. However, parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, it will cloud over. The risk of some patchy light rain and drizzle largely across the west and over the hills. And temperature-wise, double figures for all. So